Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about how people acquire immunity to a disease. There's two types of immunity, active immunity and passive immunity. Active immunity is when you are immune to a disease because you've either had the disease and now you have antibodies, or because you've been vaccinated against the disease and now you have antibodies. Healthy adults have active immunity against about 100 million different antigens. So an antigen is anything that triggers an immune response, such as bacteria, viruses, other pathogens. A pathogen is a disease-causing agent. So an antigen is the thing that triggers your immune response and causes you to make antibodies against the antigen. Passive immunity occurs when a person has antibodies that they did not make. They are given these antibodies, either by being injected with some donated from somebody, or by a baby drinking its mother's milk. It will get her antibodies. However, passive immunity doesn't last long because your body sees those antibodies as foreign invaders and quickly destroys them. So here's a chart comparing active and passive immunity. To have active immunity, you must have the disease or get a vaccine. Passive immunity is given when a baby drinks its mother's milk or through an injection of antibodies. In active immunity, it develops slowly because your body has to make its own antibodies against the disease. However, passive immunity, you are given the already made antibodies, and so this immunity is immediate. Active immunity lasts years, decades, or a lifetime, depending on how long the antibodies stick around. It's different for each disease. But passive immunity is short-term because your body destroys these foreign antibodies, and they don't last very long. Examples of active immunity include the MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, and rubella, or if you get chickenpox once, you can't get it again. That's another form of active immunity. Well, in general, you can't get it again. An example of passive immunity is the treatment for rabies. They inject antibodies to treat the disease and prevent you from getting it. Then they give you a vaccine to prevent you ever getting it later. Now, a vaccine is made to prevent a virus in the future. Antibiotics only work against bacteria in general, and they work to cure the disease and get rid of the bacteria. A cold is caused by a virus, so antibiotics won't work against it. So, vaccines are for viruses, and antibiotics are against bacteria. That's not a perfect rule, but it's a good general rule. The flu vaccine is for influenza, okay, so that's the full name of the flu virus. However, this virus mutates very easily, so each year they develop a vaccine against the 3 strains of flu they expect to be most common that year. When they guess correctly, the vaccine works well. When they guess wrong, the vaccine isn't as effective. The flu mutates slightly more quickly than the coronavirus does. Okay, so how does a vaccine work? Well, what happens is when you get a virus, the virus is known as the antigen. The antigen makes your body have an immune response. In other words, it fights it off. You have a fever, you feel yucky, and your body makes antibodies. Antibodies are proteins that recognize antigens and bind to those antigens to destroy them. However, antibodies are very specific and they will only attack and kill one single antigen. So if you have antibodies against this strain of a virus, you may or may not have antibodies against that strain of the virus. Once your body has fought off the antigen, then memory B and T cells are left in your bloodstream that can recognize that antigen. If that antigen ever enters your body again, your body can quickly recognize it and produce more antibodies to fight it off. So you can become infected with that antigen, but you usually don't develop the disease or the symptoms of the antigen. The old vaccines worked by exposing your body to a killed or a weakened form of the virus so that you could develop antibodies against it. We'll look at new forms of vaccines in a minute. And then, if you ever get the virus, your body is ready with those antibodies and can quickly make more of them if you ever get infected. Let's talk a little bit about the coronavirus vaccines for COVID-19. Two of the coronavirus vaccines, by Pfizer and Moderna, use a piece of messenger RNA that codes for the spike protein on the outside of the virus. You see, the spike protein is how the coronavirus gets into your cells. This spike protein latches onto your cell and helps the virus enter it. When a virus enters a cell, it turns the cell into a virus factory, and the cell, instead of doing its job, starts making viruses. It makes so many viruses that it finally bursts open, spreading the viruses to other cells, which then also begin making viruses. Then your body has to figure out how to make antibodies and fight off the virus so that you can finally be well. The cool thing about the Pfizer and Moderna coronavirus vaccine is that they only give you the messenger RNA for making the spike protein. You don't get the RNA to make the whole virus, so you cannot get COVID-19 from the Pfizer or Moderna coronavirus vaccines, or any of the others, by the way. If they gave you the entire piece of messenger RNA for the entire coronavirus, then yes, you could get the coronavirus from the vaccine. But that doesn't happen. They're giving you a piece of it. This messenger RNA goes into your cell and instructs your cell to start making the spike protein. Your body doesn't make the whole virus, just the spike protein. Then your body recognizes this spike protein as a foreign invader and works to fight it off. Your body develops antibodies against it. And finally, it gets back to normal. If your body ever sees this spike protein again, it will recognize it and fight it off. Your body won't recognize the rest of the virus unless you've actually had it, but this spike protein is enough to stop it. Unless, of course, the spike protein mutates. Mutations are a concern because, remember, proteins have a certain shape, and if there's too much of a mutation in the protein, it will have a different shape, and then your antibodies won't recognize it anymore. Then the vaccine won't work against that mutation. But if the spike protein only mutates slightly, or a different part of the virus mutates instead of the spike protein, then that will not have any effect, and your antibodies will still be good against the mutation. So with the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, they give you a piece of messenger RNA. There's also what are called viral vector vaccines. A vector is a carrier for a disease. A different virus is a vector for a piece of the coronavirus, not the whole thing, that helps it get into your cells so you can make antibodies. The three major viral vector vaccines right now are the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, the AstraZeneca vaccine, and the Sputnik V Russian vaccine. These all use a harmless adenovirus that helps get into your cell, and they've added the DNA for the spike protein. So instead of RNA, they're using DNA. They put the DNA in this adenovirus, and it infects you and gives you the DNA for the spike protein, and then you start producing spike proteins, and then you produce antibodies. An adenovirus usually causes the common cold. So they find the mildest adenovirus they can that gives you the mildest cold out there, and they make it even milder, and they use this virus to take the DNA into your body. So instead of just adding the messenger RNA, there's a virus that has the DNA that carries it in. When that adenovirus infects your cells, you turn into an adenovirus factory and a spike protein factory. Your cells make both of them. Then your cells fight both of them. You make antibodies for that adenovirus, and you make antibodies for the spike protein. Now here's the problem. If you're already immune to the particular adenovirus they chose, then that vaccine won't work for you, because you'll fight off the adenovirus along with the instructions for the spike protein that it carries. And your body won't make any new antibodies because the old ones work just fine. So Johnson & Johnson used a chimpanzee adenovirus. So hopefully you will not already be immune to this particular adenovirus. Sputnik used 2 different adenoviruses, one in the first shot and a different virus in the booster shot. So maybe if you're immune to one, hopefully you won't be immune to both. However, if you have a messenger RNA vaccine, it doesn't use a viral vector. It just uses the messenger RNA of the coronavirus. So there's not a problem with becoming immune to the vaccine.